Okay, Mr. Watson here, and in this video we're going to look at attribution. So attributions are the reasons or the perceived reasons to explain success or failure. These reasons, justifications, and a lot of the time excuses that we give for winning, losing, drawing, they're likely to affect how we feel and as a consequence our achievement motivation, our level of motivation. Okay, so let's look at an example. A football team may say the reason they lost was because of the bad weather. On the other hand, a football team may say the reason they lost was lack of effort. Now, we're not going to go into this now. We're going to leave it and unpack it as we move through the video. But as you can see, there's a big difference between them two attributions right there. Okay, and like I said, the reason this is important is it affects our future performances, future effort or participation. So they do have a consequence. So it's very important that coaches, players, sports clubs understand this attribution theory and how we can make or give better reasons for our results. So the first thing we're going to look at is Weiner's model of attribution. And what Weiner did was he identified four main reasons: ability, effort, task difficulty, and luck. And he called the model the locus of causality and stability. Okay, so he attempted to help identify the reasons for why people won or lost, and which reason they choose can mean different things. So here are the four reasons there, and let's add this in to give more understanding. So let's start with the locus of causality. Now, this refers to whether the individual perceives the cause of success or failure to be internal, so relating to themselves, or external, such as the environment or situation. And in Weiner's model there, you've got task difficulty. So the locus of causality, this internal and external, this links to emotions, our feelings, and attributions promote feelings of either pride or shame associated with that winning and losing. Okay, so for example, a sprinter who attributes winning a Olympic gold medal, for example, to the effort expended in preparation and training. So as you can see, that's an internal attribution on the locus of causality. So that's more likely to promote the feeling of pride because they know how hard they've tried. Okay, it's internal. Okay, on the locus of causality. However, if a football team bemoan their bad luck and say, "Oh, we're always playing teams that are better than us," okay, that's external. Okay, or they might say it's too windy. They're more likely to feel anger or shame. Okay, so it's a negative emotional response. Okay. On the other hand, let's look at on the locus of causality. If someone was to say, "I lost because I'm not good enough," now this is a big impact because that's internal, and as we know, ability is innate. So if they say, "I'm not good enough," that's going to have a negative consequence, and we might not even participate in the sport or the event anymore. Okay, so you can see how that affects our feelings and then motivation through internal and external. Okay. Now, the stability dimension, the stable and unstable, this reflects the likelihood of that outcome happening again. Okay, so it affects the expectancy of our future results. Okay, so for example, a tennis player who attributes her success, such as let's say win a tournament, and she put it down because I have the ability to stay focused under pressure. Now, because she's put that down to her ability, and as we know, ability is innate, and with the word innate comes stable from the stability dimension and enduring, she's going to expect to do well again. Okay. However, as you can imagine, if people give stable attributions for failure, like the past example, I'm not good enough, which is stable, it's going to be psychologically demotivating, and we're going to go towards learned helplessness, which we'll come on to. So we have stable and unstable, the stability dimension linking to expectancy of future results, and then locus of causality linking to our feelings. Okay? Now, Weiner got criticised a little bit for the model, and the reason being was that the model, when they would fill in the questionnaire, which happens a lot, they could only pick one reason. And ultimately, in sport, as you can imagine, sometimes there are multiple reasons for us winning and losing. So, not completely simple, but it also got criticised for being too general. It wasn't actually designed for sport. So then what Weiner did in response to this, he added in controllability. Okay, so are attributions under your control? Are they under someone else's control? Or are they completely uncontrollable? So you can see already, if you can make the links between internal and external, what we're going to get here. So we kept the same 4 reasons, ability, but not only did he said it's internal, stable, and uncontrollable because it's innate. So this is why we have to be very careful attributing our losses to ability, because they're out of our control. It's innate ability, it's internal and stable. Then we had effort, internal, unstable, and controllable. So the amount of effort you give is always in your control. So this was revealing itself as a good attribution for your failures or successes to look at. Then we have difficulty. So external, stable, controllable, uncontrollable, because there are some things that you can do to change the task difficulty. But it was external, and it is stable because your opponent's ability is under their innate ability. Okay, it's not under your control. And then finally, luck, external, unstable, and uncontrollable. So often one we're looking to avoid because we have no control over it. We shouldn't worry about it. That cliche saying, control the controllables. Okay, we should not be looking to benefit from luck, and we should not account our losses to bad luck. Okay, but what the controllability was linked to in the model was the motivation aspect. Are we going to show approach behavior or avoid behavior? So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a little look at the process of attribution, and let's give an example. So we have the outcome of event. Okay, so let's just say we finished 3rd in a 100-meter sprint. Available information is our position, 3rd, our time that we achieved, what lane we were in, what we had for breakfast, what's our training been like, and then ultimately we've got to give a causal attribution from that information to justify or give reason to the outcome of the event, finishing 3rd in a 100-meter sprint. So let's just say I finished 3rd and I put it down to my training. I worked really hard. I got a lot of track time in. My sprint start was on point because of my cue utilization. I was in that zone, controlled my arousal. I can quite easily expect to do well again. Okay. However, also, I'll feel proud of my performance because I knew how hard I worked. But let's just change these attributions up a little bit. I finished 3rd, and it's because of my ability. Now, while that might seem good because you've medalled because of your ability, you do need to be careful you're not putting a ceiling of your future progress. Because if you're competing at a good standard, you might think, now, well, that's the best you're ever going to achieve. Okay? However, if I won the race, let's just say the outcome changed, and I said it's because of my ability, that's stable, I'm going to expect to do well again because we know the stability affects expectancy, and I'm going to feel proud, okay, on that effective response. And this will link to decision on participation. So if we're feeling good about the attributions we give, we're going to race in the 100 meters again. Let's mix it up. Let's say we finished 3rd, but we were expected to win. Okay, let's change the available information. Oh, well, the reason I finished third is because they put me in lane one. You know, the whole competition was fixed to go against me to make sure I didn't win. And also, the my starting blocks were a little bit damp compared to the others. You can see I'm giving external reasons and looking to point the finger and blame. While this might protect my self esteem, and we'll come on to this on the next slide, you know, I'm looking for external reasons here. And in the long run, I'm not taking responsibility. Um, and I might feel slightly embarrassed that I finished third. Okay, so this is the process of attribution. I just want to give one final example. I'm wary I always make my videos too long, but there was a good example of a Canadian boxer, Eric Lucas, and he lost his first four bouts, or in the early part of his career, he lost four. But he attributed them losses to lack of experience. Now, this was interesting. So, this is not in the model of Weiner, but lack of experience, okay, is a factor that's clearly subject to change because as soon as he has more fights, he's going to get more experience. So he put it down to lack of experience and it did not affect his confidence or motivation. So the more fights he had was going to be under his control because if he made a personal commitment, he can change the experience or his experience because he's now had more fights. So he looked at these losses as mistakes worth making, and then he took personal responsibility, okay, for the losses. He gained more experience, and then he became the WBC super middleweight champion. So he didn't let these early losses affect him, and he attributed to reasons under his control. He's just not experienced enough. He needs to have more fights. So he took that under control and went out and done that. Okay, as you can see, a boxer who would blame the judges may not are looking for external reasons. But let's take a look at that because I keep mentioning, so it's important we look at it. It's called self-serving bias. And this is a person's tendency to attribute their failure to external reasons, like I've just said. So the boxer is losing because the judges don't like him and they keep scoring against him. Now, here's the thing, blaming the judges in boxing, but let's look at football. We've got Sir Alex Ferguson here. Now, Sir Alex Ferguson is one of the most successful managers ever, okay? And he used to blame the officials a lot. Why did he do this? He did this to protect his own self-esteem and the confidence of the team, okay? Because if you blame external reasons, you're letting everyone know it wasn't because of your innate ability, it was because of the difficulty of the task or the luck, the decisions that were going against you. Okay, but I have to say, Sir Alex Ferguson did this psychological impact, and we have to be very careful about doing this because it might seem like a good strategy. Manchester United were dominating football for years, years, and years until now. Okay, so there was a strategy. However, he was aware of the reasons they were really losing. He just didn't say that in the media. The other one is blaming the surface. The reason I lost is because the surface was slippery. That slip cost me it. Okay. Now, with this self-serving bias, and I've definitely done this. You know, I've had my excuses and I've blamed everything but myself. I've done this quite a lot, actually. But that's become a point where you think, is that really the reason? Because the reason people do this is to protect self-esteem and motivation. Okay, and sometimes at the early stage of learned helplessness, people will do that. They'll choose to race the fastest person in the class because they know they're going to lose and everyone expects them to lose. So it kind of protects that self-esteem because everyone expected them to lose. And the reason they do it is because this bias, it limits the shame, that emotion, that affective response. And when they win, they'll actually say, oh, well, that was because of me. The reason I won was because I worked really hard and I'm very good. My ability is excellent. So they highlight their personal success and deflect when they lose. They blame everything else but themselves. So that's the reason they do it. Now, the big negative about this is you're probably being false about the reasons for your performance. Now, I'm sure you have got unlucky at some point, but if you keep blaming external reasons, you may never improve the real reasons. You put a block on your own progression. So you're just aiming at trying to protect your self-esteem. But eventually, if you lose 10 times in a row, you're going to flip this bias and you'll end up with really low self-esteem, and it can turn into learned helplessness. So while Sir Alex Ferguson did used to blame the officials and he had some success with it, he was a knack individual. On the training ground, they were addressing the real reasons they lost. They just weren't saying them in the media. So it was a psychological tactic to put pressure on the referees, basically. Okay, so that's self-serving bias. Now, let's just look at achievement motivation, and we've got learned helplessness and mastery orientation. Now, we've talked about these two terms previously with personality and achievement motivation, but let's look at it again. So, learned helplessness, what is it? It's the belief that failure is inevitable. And the little thing I use is helplessness, hopelessness. So you feel hopeless when faced with a particular situation. Okay? Now, as we've just said, is if you continually blame attributions on external factors, you may end up here because eventually you'll know the real reason and you've never spent any time on trying to improve yourself. But as you can see there, I've put I put specific or global. So, specific learned helplessness. I'm a hopeless football player. Now, I have to be honest, I've also had learned helplessness in some sports because I've tried once, hasn't gone well. So I've just thought, I'm a hopeless trampoliner. That was mine. Tried once, couldn't do a front flip on my first time. So then I've just completely ruled it out. I've said I'm not good enough, basically. And that's a personal experience of mine. The reality is, gave no effort because I only tried once. Okay? But the worst one is global learned helplessness. I am hopeless at all sports. Now, this is the one we're looking to avoid. So people's had specific bad experiences and then it builds into this global learned helplessness. So helplessness, hopelessness. I am hopeless at all sports, okay? So this is what learned helplessness is. On the other hand, we've got mastery orientation. So this is the view that an individual, right, will be motivated to become an expert. So as we talked about in achievement motivation, they're knack performers. They're not afraid of failing. They deal with it as part of the process and they persist until they succeed. Okay, so they'll seek to develop their competence and acquire new skills. They don't believe that they're just looking to improve, until they get them top awards. They are not concerned about their performance relative to others. They always focus on where they currently are on their own journey and aim to improve as much as they can. So this is something that knack performers do. Now we've got to link this back to attribution. Okay. Now, low achievers, and I haven't said the knack performers there, I've said low achievers. Those who aren't experiencing success, they usually, once they hit this learned helplessness stage, attribute their failure to uncontrollable and usually stable factors such as ability. That leads to learned helplessness, blaming your ability. Like I said at the start, you might start blaming external factors to protect your self-esteem, that self-serving bias. But eventually that bias is going to flip. You'll realise you might not be good enough and start blaming on that. That will lead to learned helplessness. So obviously, quite clear here, we need to focus on other things other than ability, which we'll come on to. Our high achievers, they're orientated towards mastery, being a knack individual, and they attribute their failure to controllable and unstable factors such as effort. So if they lose, they might say, I didn't try hard enough. I can change that next time. And if they win, they might say, I tried really hard. They were fully in control. So it's also internal. Okay, so that's, we're getting the feelings of pride. Okay, so it's quite clear from all of this is that learned helplessness is something we need to avoid. However, if we are dealing with athletes who have learned helplessness, or like I said myself, I know I had specific learned helplessness, what could I do to try and change that? Or what can we do? So we have something called attribution retraining. So basically this is to change from learned helplessness into mastery orientation. Okay, so we're looking to optimize sports performance. So, as I said, we're basically looking in this from going from external, uncontrollable, and stable things such as ability to internal, controllable, and unstable. So, examples: I lack the ability. So, I feel hopeless, I lack the ability. Well, how about I just got the tactics wrong? Now, while having the wrong tactics or the wrong technique might still frustrate me and disappoint me, that's something I can change. I can go and work on a more efficient technique that suits me. I can go and work on a zone defense rather than a man to man. I can now have actionable points. So that attribution has just changed on its head. I've given things that I can control, okay, and that are more unstable and can change from time to time. I just got the technique wrong on that free throw. Next time I'll change it. So you can get the technique wrong and right, so it's unstable, but you can control it, you can work on it. So that's a much better attribution. Or the referee, he was against us the whole game, he kept giving us bad decisions, bad decisions, bad decisions. Well, instead of looking for them excuses, maybe you just weren't trying hard enough. So maybe you were committing lazy fouls and the referee was punishing you because you actually weren't trying hard enough to run back. Okay, so I'm flicking to that effort. I'm looking on the Weiner model, I'm looking to attribute these reasons to things such as effort that's internal and unstable. And of course, if you're getting the gold standard and you've cream of the crop, give account to your ability too, but just be very careful with the ability, especially attributing losses to ability, because it can lead to learned helplessness with no future in the sport. And as we know, affects motivation, future participation, and then behaviours. Okay, so another long video, one you'll need to pause, okay, flick back through, rewind, fast forward if you already know it through the learn helplessness. And like I said, with this, there's loads and loads of examples for the reasons we give for this, but Cambridge asked us to specifically focus on Weiner's model. There are models from Roberts and Pascuzzi where there's luck, task difficulty, teamwork, officials. But this is what we need to know. Okay, so I hope you got something out of the video. Thank you.